All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast. I am really excited to have Angela on the show today. We connected on Instagram. She's another fellow Florida business owning mom, which is probably how we connected, hashtags or something like that. Who knows? I love the internet. You get to find the best people. But her framework for building a funnel in 4 simple steps and less than 6 hours is so fascinating because we all hear about funnels. And I talk a lot about the marketing funnel here on the podcast in terms of attract, nurture, and convert. But then there's also technical funnels and automated funnels. And that's exactly what she helps business owners with in her business, the Systems RX, because that part can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of choices out there. There's a lot of things to think through, and she does a great job being your go-to tech and automation whiz and helps you supercharge all things email funnels and client management systems. So I'm really excited to get into this today. Angela, thank you so much for being here. Share with us a little bit about your business and how you got started and how you support clients today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Angela, founder of the Systems RX, and I've got a couple titles in my life. And being a mom of two is right up there with being a business owner. So I totally understand what it's like to have to juggle being a business owner and all the other responsibilities we have in life, mom, dog mom, whatever it is. And let's be honest, we all have a life outside of these digital business walls. And a little bit about my business journey. I actually started my business in 2019 as a virtual assistant doing all the admin things. And then somewhere along the way, I discovered that I really, really love tech and automations and helping people leverage automations in their business so that they can have more free time or just more space to be in their creative zone of genius to grow their business. And so I eventually niched down to funnels and automations. And as a tech and automation specialist, I'm really passionate about two things. The first one is make it easy for your people to learn about you, work with you, and rave about you so that the cycle continues. And the second one is automating the things that you don't like doing and don't have the time to do. So I created a library of resources called the Funnel Pharmacy, and it helps other people, other online business owners achieve these things in their business without the tech headache that comes with trying to figure out how to piece together all the things, all of the information that you can find out there about funnels and automated systems and things like that.
Yeah, I just love the way your brain works in terms of like trying to simplify things. And we're recording this in October, but you just shared recently on Instagram, like you had an idea for helping people with organizing their bundles and summits and collaboration. And it was something because you were experiencing, like, this is a lot of details to keep track of, and there's got to be a better way to organize it. So before we get into like funnel tech, will you talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of my ideas for resources that I create in my funnel pharmacy are things that I struggle with. And I'm like, okay, if this is something I'm struggling with, I'm sure someone else is struggling with it too. And most of the first time I tried creating a digital product, I was like, I'm just going to throw this out there to see if anyone if this would help anyone and if anyone would benefit from it. And sure enough, it's like, oh, okay. So everyone's having the same problem. So that I kind of had that mindset of every time I saw an area of opportunity in my business to automate something, I would share it with my audience. And sure enough, it would help them too. So, and that's where I'm so passionate about making things easy for you as a business owner, and also making it easy for people to learn about you and work with you and rave with you, because when you make it easy for yourself and for your clients, business is just so much easier and also so much more sustainable.
Yeah. And, we definitely want to make it easier for our clients to work with us. And I know that's a conversation that I have with clients a lot of times when, as you know, I help people create 9 grids. And I've talked to clients as we're creating their 9 grids about okay, well, how do you want people to get in touch with you? Do you want them to email you? Do you want them to call you? Do you want them to fill out a form? Do you want them to send you a DM? And what I found is that people are like, well, any of those. Well, that's not easy for you because now you have 100 places that you have to keep track of, but it
Mm-hmm.
actually makes it more difficult for your client because now they're having to make another decision of how to reach out
Yes.
versus if it's one way, it simplifies it.
Exactly. And like this day and age, people want things and they want things now. Like you think Amazon Prime, you think like our internet is like fast speed internet. When things are slow, it's just like, oh, like it's just a hassle. And also, like you talked about the decision thing, like when people are virtually raising their hand to want to learn more about you, the faster you can get them that information that they need, the easier you're making it for them to make a decision to work with you. And when you think about like the more time you give them to like think about something, the more time they have to like change their mind and go to someone else. So that's where like when you use a tool like ManyChat in your ninth grade and you like use those keywords to trigger a workflow so that you can send them the link in their inbox right away, like it gives them the information that they need right away and then they can get their hands on it and they can start implementing and they know like, okay, this is a person that I trust and I really want to work with them.
Yes. So, okay, let's talk about ManyChat for a second and that keyword strategy. It's funny because if you're not in the online business or entrepreneur space, like you might not be familiar with it. And I say that because I was talking to my husband about it and I was telling him about ManyChat and I was like, you see those reels or those posts that are like, DM me this word or comment this word. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen that. So if you're not familiar, the keyword strategy is on a social media post to use a keyword and have your reader either send that keyword to you in a DM or in a comment, and then you respond back with specific information. And ManyChat is a tool that helps you automate that. So talk a little bit about what that does and why you think it's such a great tool for people to try.
Yeah, so it number one, they just have to type the keyword and you keep the keyword short and simple. And it triggers an automatic response back like, okay, check your DMs. And then they'll immediately get a message in their DMs. And depending on what the exchange is, so I have a couple on my Instagram. If anyone listening to this and you want to go like try it out on my Instagram post, for my paid offers, usually like they type in the keyword and I'll send them a direct link to the checkout for the paid offer. But if it's an opt-in where I want to get their name and their email, instead of having them go to the link in bio and then like opening up another page and having to put in their name and their email and then hit the submit button, I do all of that within the DMs through ManyChat. So it's a series of like steps that it will trigger like, okay, hey, I heard you wanted this thing, this masterclass is what I have. Can I get your first name? They type in their first name and then it triggers the next set of questions. Like, great, what is your email? And then they type in their email. And then the next step in my specific workflow, because my masterclass, I have a video version and I have a private podcast version. So then the next question that I ask them is, okay, now which version would you like, the masterclass or the private podcast? And they choose that. And then somehow through the magic of second automations, all of that gets sent over to my email marketing provider, which is ActiveCampaign. And they get emailed the link, the right link to either watch the masterclass or to listen to the private podcast. And all of this happens within Instagram. They don't have to leave the app. They don't have to go to my bio, click the link in my bio and go to my website. And it just makes it so streamlined that like it makes their decisions so much easier compared to like having to go through all these like loops and like having to wait and things like that. So that's how
Yeah.
I have
And I think
ManyChat set up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I know for me, when I first heard about ManyChat, I thought like, well, I don't have that many followers. I don't get that many DMs. Like, why do I need this? But mom and a person who doesn't want to be on my phone 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
it saves me time because then I'm able to, like you said, answer those questions I do get immediately without having to actually be on my phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to say like I don't like having like the lack of my time or my inability to be tied to my phone or my laptop be a bottleneck in my business. And that's where automations like ManyChat is just so helpful. Because like I don't like that feeling like when I'm spending time with my kids or cooking dinner, like, oh my God, I gotta do this thing. And it's like this nagging like thought just like hanging around, like you gotta go do this thing, you gotta go do this thing. It's just a peace of mind that you have, like with a tool like ManyChat, it's like, oh, okay, it's taken care of. I don't have to go back and like do it.
Yeah. And so when we think about the marketing funnel, somebody comes across your Instagram, whether they met you at a networking event, they heard about you on a podcast, they found you via a keyword or hashtag, they've now been attracted. Your 9 grid can serve as that nurture tool because you're giving value, you're sharing information, they're getting to know you. And then that keyword strategy can be the convert tool because now we're converting them to be on our email list, moving them down the funnel, and then sharing our paid offers either via the keywords or via an automated email funnel. So that feels like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Talk to me a little bit about when you're designing a funnel, like 4 simple steps that you feel like are necessary to design a funnel and it not become like, oh my gosh, so overwhelming.
Yeah, so I have a signature funnel building framework that I've followed religiously since 2020 to build, integrate, and test funnels for 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs. And people tend to panic when you start like going into funnel talk and funnel jargon. So I'm going to compare my framework to cooking a meal, like when you're preparing a meal. Because have you ever tried to make a meal and then you realize halfway through, like while you're cooking, that you're missing some ingredients? Or like, and then you're left wondering, like, okay, do I stop cooking and run out to the grocery store to get the ingredients that you need, or do I just skip those ingredients and hope for the best? Like, we'll just see what happens. Compared to if you were strategic about the meal that you're making. So I'll give an example. If you're meal prepping for the week and you're like, okay, got to decide what I need to cook is usually the first thing that you think of. Honestly, the hardest part for me is choosing the recipe. Like, what am I going to cook? You scroll through like endless food blogs or like Pinterest board to find the recipe. And when you finally decide, then you make sure you have all the ingredients that you need and all the kitchen tools to prepare the meal. Because if you need one of those fancy mixers and you don't have one, like you go out and you get one or you order it on Amazon. And then once you have all the things you need, then you start cooking. And here's how that's kind of similar to building a funnel in my funnel building framework. So the first part is that strategy phase. This is where you choose the recipe and you make sure you have all the tools and the ingredients that you need. So in funnel talk, this is where you choose your funnel strategy. You decide what your opt-in is going to be. How are people going to find you? How are people going to enter your funnel? How are they going to virtually raise their hand to want to like learn more about what you have to offer? And then also your tech stack needs strategy too. You need to choose the right tech stack to support the vision that you have for your funnel. So that's the first phase, is be strategic about it. It's kind of like when someone's building a home, you don't just start like digging ground somewhere and like, hope for the best and like you don't know what tools you need, things like that. So when you're strategic about your funnel building process, it will make things so much easier. So that's the first phase, deciding your funnel strategy and then making sure that you have the right tech stack to support that strategy. I'll add one more thing about that is because when you start building a funnel and realizing that you don't have the right tools and then you have to migrate everything into another platform, it's a pain in the butt. It's a big, big pain in the butt. So strategy first. All right. Then comes the setup phase. That's the second phase of my funnel building framework. And going back to the whole cooking metaphor here, when you run out to the grocery store and you buy all the missing ingredients that you need that you don't already have. So going back to funnel talk, this is where you set up the individual components of your funnel. So email segmentations, tags, lists, whatever it is, your opt-in page, your sales page, your emails, your checkout form, your course hosting platform. I like to do it in chronological order of the customer journey to make the process more streamlined. So if you think about any funnels that you've gone through yourself, just think of that journey and do it in that chronological order. And then after that, you start the cooking process, which would be the third phase of the funnel building process. And I call it the simplified phase, which in my opinion is my favorite phase because this is where you tie all the individual components together with automations and integrations to create a cohesive and seamless funnel, and you bring it to life. So this is where you connect your opt-in page to your email marketing platform or your checkout platform to your course hosting platform. And again, you do this in chronological order of the customer journey to make things more streamlined. So you're not like jumping back and forth and picking like different places to start with. Do it in chronological order of the customer journey. And lastly, you get to the showcase phase. And this is where you do a taste test and make sure that, your meal tastes fine before you start eating it. And this is where you take your funnel for a test drive. You make sure that everything is connected the way it's supposed to be. You test out the front end of the funnel, like you're an actual person going through the funnel. and then you check the back end to make sure everything is working before you launch. So when you break down the funnel building process like this, it makes it seem a little bit less headachy because it doesn't seem like, oh my God, so many things going on at once. So going back to like what I mentioned in the beginning of the cooking example, if you start cooking without really knowing what you're cooking, like, and even if you have the ingredients and the tools for that recipe, it makes the cooking process a little bit less stressful, and you like hope for the best. Like that's just so, like, it sounds like an episode of Iron Chef where you're like, oh my God, so many things going on at once. Versus like if you're strategic with the process and you figure out exactly what you're cooking, you know, you have all the tools, or like when you like start like cutting all the ingredients and you have it all ready to go and you just like toss everything into the pot or like the pan, it's just like it's much more chill. You can like play
Yeah.
music while you're cooking and like sip on a glass of wine while you're cooking. So that's how I approach funnels. It's like, just think of it as cooking. It doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. You just break it up into phases like that, and it's just a lot easier.
Well, I'm obsessed with a good analogy. So I absolutely love the cooking analogy. And when I think about it, it's like, so you could do this yourself, which is just like going on Pinterest, getting a recipe, getting all the ingredients, buying all the things. Or you could get some help from the funnel pharmacy, which is like having Home Chef or some meal prep kits
Yeah,
or something like that. Or you could just go out to eat and have Angela do it for you, because sometimes you just want to go to a restaurant because you're
yeah,
exhausted and you don't have time.
exactly. No time to clean up and all of that.
Yes, that's awesome. So, when it comes to, you said starting out thinking about your tech stack, I'm actually curious if you found business owners have an idea for a funnel, or you've worked with clients that have an idea for a funnel and they realize that their existing tech stack doesn't do all the things that they need it to do. Is that like a, oh my gosh, we have to start over? Or are there automations or tools that you can use to kind of connect and integrate those tools so you don't have to start over?
So I typically ask them before I work with them, how committed are you to your tech stack right now? Like, are you willing to migrate if it's better for the strategy that you have in mind?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you think the cost of migrating, like that includes time too, especially
Hmm.
if they've been on a platform for a really long time. So then we take a look at, okay, if they've been in business for a while and they're really committed to their tech stack, then we build their funnel based on the tech stack that they have. But if they're
Hmm.
just starting out and they have a funnel in mind, um, then really we look at their budget. So if
Hmm.
they're, and I have what I call the $0 tech stack to launch your first funnel. Where if you're just starting out and you don't want to pay for these expensive platforms, you can still do it. There's still a way to do it. But I I go with like what works for you right now. If you don't want to
Hmm.
change it, that's fine. We can just modify your funnel strategy to fit with that. But then there are also creative ways for if you want to stick with your tech stack, but you also want your funnel strategy, you don't want to change it. There are creative ways to do it. It just makes things a little bit more complicated. So I do bring that up with my clients too, is because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be managing your funnel. So if you
Right.
feel that this is manageable for you and that you can maintain it, because your funnels do need maintenance, um, if you feel like you can maintain it on your own, great. We can go the complicated route and add all these like workarounds and things like that. But if they start like, if I start noticing like a sense of panic when they like hear about how like all these things work together, they're like, okay, we can simplify, we can tone it down, we can find other ways. And that's where that strategy phase usually takes the longest, because you have to like figure out what will work, not just for the funnel, but also your tech stack, and also if you're able to maintain. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But also, your
Yeah.
strategy is never set in stone. You can always tweak your funnels as it goes, but tweak when you
Yeah.
know you have data, when you have hard data to back up, like, okay, it's working or it's not working. So, but you'll never know unless you try it, right?
Yes, that's so true. And I always say this about content, that like, okay content is better than no content, because if you don't put it out there, you're never going to learn, you're never going to get better. And it's the same thing with building a funnel and getting some data behind it. You mentioned funnel maintenance. How do you, for your own funnels, kind of like make sure that you're maintaining them and checking them and not letting it being like oh shoot, I did that 2 years ago and I don't know what's going on there now.
Yeah. I go through my funnels once every 3 months just to make sure that they're working.
Mm-hmm.
I have an embarrassing amount of email addresses to test funnels. So I do that. I also look at open rates, click-through rates, and unsubscribe rates for my emails in my funnels. If I'm noticing a weird drop-off in open rates, then I know either an email's not sending out or the subject line or the email is just not clicking with my audience. So that's where I can kind of note like, okay, maybe something needs to change here. And also talking about drop-off rates, if I'm noticing a huge drop-off rates between the number of people looking at my emails and the number of people looking at my sales page, maybe the links in my emails aren't working. So checking through those links. And that's where going through your funnel every couple of months and like clicking all the links in the emails and like making sure everything is working is so crucial. Another thing that most people don't think about is have a reminder to renew your domain. Even if it's on auto renew, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients like come to me and they're like, my website's not working. Like people are saying that they can't go on my website. And it's like, well, because it says your domain has expired. So if your domain has expired, people can't go to your website. They can't go to your sales page. They can't go to your opt-in. Your whole funnel basically is not working. So have a reminder for when your domain, whatever you use, Namecheap, GoDaddy, whatever it is, just make sure that that thing is always up and running. Because that's not a good place to be in. It's not a fun message to get.
That's a really good tip. And I can even share from a corporate perspective, like same thing. I worked for a multi-million-dollar company that we let a domain expire. And it was because like the credit card that we had on file for auto pay got expired or something changed. And so then you're right, like the controller, it was like, you have to put this on your calendar that you make sure this domain gets auto renewed or renewed manually because you cannot have it go down. And that's easily something I can see that you would maybe just not think about because it's not something you think about every day. So I love that tip. And I love what you said about clicking links. Like sometimes links get broken, particularly if you're sharing a link to like a Google document or a Loom video, or you changed a domain of a landing page because you changed the name of a thing or whatever. You never know. So just checking them because all of those things contribute to the user experience. And I will share a story. I actually had a client email me this morning. I have a digital product that I had created like probably 2 years ago at this point. I don't regularly promote it. It's on my website. I will say when you sell a product like that, it feels like free money. It feels like you won the lottery. So if you're in the thick of creating digital products and they're not selling, like just keep going. They will. But she emailed me, thankfully, she was kind enough to email me and say like, hey, this video for this Loom video doesn't work anymore. Well, it didn't work because I was going to phase that product out. And so I was cleaning up my Loom folders and I deleted this video and I didn't even think about the fact that it was still in this email series. And so those are, like you said, every 3 months, a good just double check can be really helpful in your client experience.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, those are some ways that I add or check up on my funnels, and also add these tasks to your project management tool or your calendar, whatever you use to remind yourself to do things. Like just add it to your calendar because it's easy to forget.
Yes, I'm super curious. What's your project management tool of choice?
It's not typical. And if I were to share it with you, you'd probably freak out a little bit. I use Airtable. People typically don't recommend it, but I have really struggled to find a project management tool that works for my brain. And I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, so consistency with like a project management tool has been really, really hard. But Airtable has really worked for me. And I love Airtable. It's like,
that's so interesting because I can tell you, like when I found out about ClickUp, I was like, yes, this looks amazing. And I even set up a bunch of it. And then I was like, overwhelmed and
Yeah.
abandoned it. And now it's like I go between a Google Doc, a Google Calendar, pen and paper, a half a click up, and I'm just like, I will have to maybe look at Airtable, because I think you're right. It's not the specific tool, it's finding the tool that works with the way your brain works.
Yes, yes. And I've hesitated. I used to do project management tool setup for clients, but then I realized everyone's brains work so differently. What works for me may not work for someone else. And so I stopped doing it because like they would pay money to set it up and then at the end of the day they won't use it because it doesn't work for their brain. So yeah, find a tool
Yes.
that works for you. And I built my Airtable project database to work for me. And that's why I love Airtable,
Mhm.
because it's just so customizable.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this was such an insightful conversation. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you a couple more get to know you questions now that we know your favorite project management tool. And then
Yeah.
we'll let you share where listeners can find you. But the first one, we always talk so often on the Consistency Corner about brand values. And so I would love to know one of your brand values and how did you land on that?
Yeah, so one of my brand values is sustainability. I've worked behind the scenes of some really successful businesses that led to extreme burnout because it wasn't set up to be sustainable. And that's why I'm so passionate about automations, because when you let the robots do the little admin things, it preserves your CEO role. So you can stay in your zone of genius and stay in love with your business. Because when you're in burnout mode and you start to hate your business, that's a very dangerous place to be. So building and maintaining a sustainable business is really, really important for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right that I do actually wish that that's something that would be talked about a little bit more, of that burnout phase of like, I just want to burn my business to the ground, because it happens. It does happen. And we see the glossy social media photos and think that like everybody's out living on yachts, but the person that is living that laptop lifestyle likely went through a season of burnout,
Mm-hmm.
because if we don't have the systems and tools in place, you're often going to go through that. And so learning these tech tools, I think, is really important and helpful so that you don't burn yourself out. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we also talk so much about personal development, as that's one of my brand values. So I love to ask our guests, what is a favorite personal development book or podcast? Or if you're like me and can't pick a favorite, something you read or heard recently that really resonated with you.
Yeah. Right now it's the Flow podcast by Dr. Julia. Her first of all, her voice just sounds like home, like just like so calming. But so she teaches you how to find your flow and surf the waves of life with joy, ease, and meaning. So definitely check it out and support her. She also just lost her home from the fires in Hawaii. So and she talks a lot about her journey on her podcast too. So she's an amazing podcast, an amazing person. So yeah, that's right now that's my favorite personal development podcast.
I love that. And I love that, like finding your own flow. And I think, like you shared, you've been diagnosed with ADHD. Like, that's something that, like, I also am in a season of like, do I have ADHD? Why can't I focus? What is happening? Why can't I get into a flow state in work? And so trying to find those different ways to get into that flow state. And I think a big part of that for an entrepreneur is being able to stay in your zone of genius, having those automations or those team outsourced support partners that
Mm-hmm.
can take the things off that trip you up. So I so appreciate that you help people with that. The last question, because we talk so much about consistency, and I want to remind everyone that consistent doesn't have to mean constant, but I would love to know something that you are really consistent with, either in your business or your personal life, that you are proud of.
Yeah, I have two. So the first one falls into both categories, but it's really just writing things down as soon as I think of it. Oh my gosh, like I'm a mama too. My mom brain is real and I forget things really easily. So when I have a thought or idea, I write it down right away. Even if it's like the worst is when it's in the middle of the night, but it's a really good idea. And if I tell myself I'll write it down in the morning, I will not remember. So I'll literally pull up my phone and like write it down. So that's the first one. And the second one is a business one, and it's my efficient emails database. And it kind of ties into like the whole writing things down thing, but I have an Airtable form saved on my phone. And when I get an idea for content or like email, I fill out this form and it will automatically add the idea to my Airtable database. And it will also add a task to my project management tool to remind me to finish this email and send it out. And it's a database where I can plan, write, and track all of my emails in one place. Because it used to be right on my phone, on my notes app, or a Google Doc, or a Notion doc, and like having to keep track of all of my emails in all of these different places, and then adding it to my email marketing platform, and then tracking the data in a Google Sheet. It's like so many different places. Now I've consolidated it to two softwares, my Airtable database and my email marketing platform. Everything is so streamlined, and it makes my email writing process so much more efficient.
Yeah, I love that. And then you have all the data right in front of you. So when you're trying to
Yes.
think about what's effective, what's not effective, you're not like digging for information. It's all right there. That's awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here. If listeners are interested in connecting with you, learning more, where do you hang out online, and where can they find you to learn more about the funnel pharmacy we're working with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My handle is thesystemsrx, or you can find me on my website, thesystemsrx.com. And on my website, you can also learn about my top 5 conversion hurting funnel building mistakes masterclass. And I'll send you a link so you can include it in the show notes too, just for your people. But that's where you can find all of my stuff, is on my website or my Instagram.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Angela, again so much for being here. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Ruthie.